Talon Rise had never been the kind of man to panic. He was an engineer on Orlia IV, a dry, rocky planet far from the core systems, where the sky stretched wide and empty, dust-colored and harsh under the weak sun. Life in the mining colony was monotonous, filled with the clanking of machines, the endless drilling into the mineral-rich rocks, and the muted conversations of workers who had long given up dreaming. Most days, Talon kept to his routines, repairing automated rigs, calibrating drones, and avoiding the monotony that gnawed at everyone's spirits. But that morning, everything changed. It began with a sound, a high, shrill cry that cut through the wind that always whipped across the valley. At first, Talon thought it was one of the young miners calling for help, or perhaps a malfunctioning drone. But the sound was wrong. It carried a melody, a tone almost human in its sadness, and yet not human at all. Curious, he followed the sound across the jagged terrain, climbing over jagged rocks and slipping through narrow crevices. Each step felt heavier than the last, as if some unseen force was urging him forward. Then he saw it. Huddled in the shadows of a fallen ore container was a small creature, no larger than a rabbit, with scales that shimmered faintly even in the dim light. Its wings, folded against its back, were too small for flight, and its eyes, large, amber, and impossibly intelligent, stared at him with unspoken fear. The creature's chest heaved, and every breath it took was punctuated by a soft, heartbreaking whine. It looked up at him with a desperation that shook something deep within Talon. He crouched slowly, careful not to scare it. "Hey there, it's okay," he whispered. The creature's head tilted, and it blinked at him, as if trying to decide whether he was friend or foe. He checked the surrounding area. No other workers were nearby, no patrols, and no drones. Whatever this thing was, it had been left alone, hidden in the rubble. Talon's heart sank. This was not just an ordinary animal. Its scales were too perfectly formed, its eyes too expressive. It was something ancient, something that did not belong in the mining colony, or perhaps something the colony had never seen before. Talon reached into his pack, pulling out scraps of protein bars and a small water container. The creature sniffed the air cautiously, then, after a moment of hesitation, stepped forward and took the food in its tiny claws. Talon's hand trembled slightly as he offered more, and the creature ate greedily. He noticed then the way it made a soft purring sound, vibrations that seemed almost musical. It was intelligent. Talon knew it instinctively. He had to get it somewhere safe. The colony would never understand, not yet. Scientists would study it, maybe even destroy it in the name of research. Talon glanced around. There was only one place where he could hide the creature safely. His quarters, a small room filled with spare parts, tools, and old containers he used for his experiments. The walk back was tense. Every shadow seemed alive, every gust of wind a threat. But the creature stayed close, following him as if it understood the danger. When they reached his quarters, he closed the door quietly and set the creature down on a makeshift bed of soft cloth. It sniffed the surroundings, eyes wide with curiosity. Talon sank onto a chair opposite it, trying to process what had just happened. "You're not from around here, are you?" he murmured. The creature tilted its head again, the motion almost human, almost pleading. Talon smiled faintly despite the fear that still clung to him. He had no idea what this creature was, but he knew one thing: it trusted him. Night fell fast on Orlia IV, as it always did. The weak sun disappeared behind jagged mountains, and the valley was swallowed in darkness. Talon watched the creature curl up and close its eyes, the faint glow of its scales dimming as it rested. He decided to stay with it, even though he had work to do. There was a strange calm in the room, a silence broken only by the soft sound of its breathing. He remembered the stories his grandmother used to tell him, long before he left Earth. Stories of dragons and creatures that could bond with humans, of beings who recognized courage and kindness. He had laughed at them then, thinking them foolish tales. But now, staring at this tiny, fragile creature, he wondered if some of those stories were real, if somewhere in the universe there were things that waited for the right human to notice them. The night was restless. Talon found himself talking to the creature, telling it about the colony, about the harsh winds, about the endless rocks and the machines that never slept. He spoke in whispers, unsure if it understood, and yet it seemed to listen. Every now and then it made a soft sound, almost like a reply. And in those moments, Talon felt a strange connection, a thread that tied them together across species, across worlds. By dawn, the sky over Orlia IV was pale and empty, as if the night had never existed. Talon was still awake, leaning against the wall, eyes fixed on the creature that had nestled in his lap. Then he heard it, a low rumble like distant thunder but softer, more deliberate. He looked up. The sky was changing. Shadows moved against the pale light, vast shapes that he could not yet define. At first, he thought it was a trick of the morning sun on the clouds. But as he watched, the shapes grew larger, darker, and more distinct. Wings. Hundreds of them, perhaps thousands, stretching across the horizon. The shadows moved with purpose, circling the valley above the colony. Talon's heart raced. The creature in his lap stirred, lifting its head and letting out a sharp, piercing cry. The sound carried, almost like a signal, and the shadows above seemed to respond. He could feel the air shift, the ground vibrate slightly under the distant movement. He ran to the window, pressing his hands against the glass. The sky was alive with wings, creatures that defied all logic, all science he knew. They moved as if guided by a single mind, circling the colony with precision, and yet there was no aggression. Not yet, but the sheer scale of their presence was overwhelming. The colony began to stir. Miners and engineers emerged from their quarters, looking up in fear and awe. Drones were sent to investigate, but they faltered mid-flight, their systems disrupted by an invisible force. Even the communication arrays sputtered, unable to send messages. Talon's mind raced. He remembered the baby dragon in his lap. Could it be connected? Could it have called them here? He lifted it gently, holding it up toward the sky. The creature's wings fluttered faintly, and its amber eyes glowed brighter. Another cry left its throat, longer and more melodic than before. Above, the shadowy shapes paused, then tilted as if in recognition. Talon could not believe his eyes. The creatures of the sky were responding to the small dragon he had saved. He felt a thrill of hope and fear at once. Humanity had never seen anything like this. If the dragons, or whatever they truly were, chose to attack, the colony would be destroyed within minutes. But if they could be communicated with, perhaps there was a chance. He stepped outside, holding the creature aloft. The wind tugged at him, the shadows above blurring into immense forms, yet the baby dragon seemed unafraid. Miners and engineers watched in stunned silence as Talon spoke, more to himself than anyone else. "You see me. I won't hurt you, I only want peace." A beat passed, then another. The dragons above shifted again, closer now, wings cutting the air with a power that made the ground tremble. And then, almost imperceptibly, they began to descend. Not violently, but carefully, circling lower and lower as if inspecting the valley, the humans, the small dragon that had called them. A sense of wonder filled Talon's chest. He realized in that moment that the colony's fate was not just in human hands. It had never been. But there was a spark of something new, something extraordinary. The spark of connection, of courage, of empathy that had reached across species, across worlds, and drawn these magnificent beings to their side. By the time the sun rose fully, painting the jagged rocks with gold and red, the sky was almost entirely dark with wings. The colony had never experienced silence like it, not the emptiness of space, nor the whirring of machines, nor even the isolated loneliness that sometimes haunted the miners. This was different. This was awe, mixed with fear, mixed with hope. Talon stood among his fellow humans, the baby dragon safe in his arms, and understood that nothing would ever be the same. The universe was larger than they had imagined, stranger than they had believed. And somehow humanity had found a place in it, not through conquest or technology, but through the simplest of acts: kindness, courage, and the willingness to protect something weaker than themselves. The shadows above were no longer just threats. They were potential allies. And Talon knew, with a certainty he had never felt before, that this was only the beginning. He looked down at the baby dragon, whose eyes now shimmered like molten gold in the morning light. "We'll figure this out," he whispered. "Together." And somewhere above, the wings of 1,000 dragons shifted in response, as if agreeing. The wind carried their cries across the valley, and for the first time in years, Orlaya IV felt alive. Not just a colony, but a place of stories, of legends, of hope. Talon did not know what tomorrow would bring, only that humanity had survived the impossible once more, and that perhaps, just perhaps, they could rise to meet whatever else the universe had in store. The sun rose higher over Orlaya IV, but the light barely reached the valley floor. Shadows of enormous wings flickered across the jagged rocks, blotting out the pale sky. Talon Rise held the baby dragon in his arms, feeling its soft warmth, its tiny heartbeat matching his own. The colony had gathered in the open spaces near the mining rigs, every eye turned upward, every face a mixture of fear, wonder, and disbelief. Military drones hovered at the edges of the sky, attempting to scan the dragons, but their sensors failed. Systems short-circuited, lights flickered, and energy shields buzzed with overload. Engineers muttered to each other, trying to stabilize the drones, but even they realized it was useless. These creatures were unlike anything recorded in galactic databases, unlike anything any human had ever seen. The largest dragon circled lower, its wings spanning nearly the width of a cargo ship. Its scales glimmered in shifting colors like molten metal, and its eyes glowed a bright amber that seemed to pierce the soul. It hovered over the colony's central plaza, wings beating slowly yet powerfully, stirring dust and debris across the ground. Workers instinctively ducked, some pressing themselves against walls, others clutching whatever they could for protection. Talon felt the tiny dragon stir in his arms. It made a soft, musical call, a tone that carried through the wind. Immediately, the massive dragon above paused, tilting its head as if listening. Then another dragon emerged from the sky, followed by another, forming a massive arc of wings that stretched over the entire valley. Talon realized with a chill that they were being observed, not attacked, but the sheer scale of their presence was terrifying. Talon stepped forward, holding the baby dragon higher. "It's okay," he called out, his voice steady despite the fear coiling in his stomach. "We don't want to fight," the baby dragon responded with a trill, and the dragons above shifted. Some of them flapped their wings, creating gusts strong enough to knock people off their feet. But none attacked. Talon understood they were testing, evaluating, learning. The colony could survive if they could prove themselves intelligent, capable, and perhaps worthy. Dr. Maris, the colony's lead scientist, approached cautiously. "Talon, what is that thing? What is it doing to them?" she asked, her voice trembling with a mixture of awe and fear. Talon shook his head. "I don't know, I just saved it, fed it, that's all." He glanced up as the dragons descended slightly, wings brushing clouds of dust. I think it's calling them, and they're listening." The colony's council quickly convened, tension running high. Some wanted to fire weapons, fearing an attack. Others argued to retreat into the underground shelters. Talon intervened. "No, if we do anything aggressive, they'll attack. We have to stay calm. Watch, observe, and listen." Minutes passed like hours. The dragons hovered above the colony, giant shadows moving with a rhythm that felt almost musical. The baby dragon, held securely in Talon's arms, trilled again. This time, the sound carried emotion, pleading, curiosity, trust. The largest dragon leaned closer, eyes narrowing. It was evaluating, sensing the tiny creature's connection to Talon, to humanity. Then came the first moment of action. A small group of miners, panicked and untrained, tried to approach the dragons with makeshift weapons. Talon's shout rang out, sharp and commanding. "Stop! You'll destroy everything." The baby dragon made a sharp, high-pitched whistle. The dragons above reacted instantly, wings flaring, creating a blast of wind that threw the miners to the ground harmlessly. The message was clear: protect the weak, punish recklessness. Talon's heart pounded, both terrified and exhilarated. These beings recognized right and wrong, courage and foolishness. Humanity was being tested, and the colony had just passed one test and failed another. Over the next hours, Talon worked with Dr. Maris and a few trusted engineers. They constructed a series of signals, using light and sound to communicate with the dragons. The baby dragon acted as a guide, responding to their gestures and directing the larger creatures' attention. Slowly, they learned that the dragons could understand intent, strategy, and emotion. Not words, not technology, but human thought and feeling. The colony's defense systems were hastily repurposed. Instead of weapons, they became signaling devices. Lights blinked in sequences, sound pulses echoed across the valley, and Talon's team used these to communicate. "We will not harm you. We will coexist." By evening, the dragons' behavior shifted. They hovered lower, wings outstretched, circling above but no longer threatening. The largest one landed near the central plaza, massive claws stirring dust but leaving buildings untouched. Its eyes regarded Talon with an intensity that made him step back in awe. "You did this," Talon whispered to the baby dragon. "They're here because of you." The little creature chirped softly, nuzzling his shoulder. Talon felt a strange pride mixed with a heavy weight of responsibility. Humanity was being judged by these ancient beings, and their survival depended not on weapons, but on trust, empathy, and courage. As night fell, Orlia IV's twin moons cast silver light across the valley. The dragons' wings created moving shadows, shifting with every beat, creating an almost hypnotic rhythm. The colony was alive with fear and fascination, every human aware that they were witnessing history. Not the history of machines or politics, but the history of connection, of human compassion reaching across species and space. Talon walked through the plaza, observing the colony. People whispered to each other, some crying, some laughing nervously. The engineers had already begun recording patterns in the dragons' behavior, trying to understand the rules that governed their interactions. Talon knew it would take weeks to decode, maybe longer. But the first lesson was clear. These creatures were intelligent, powerful, and potentially loyal allies. A sudden rumble shook the valley. Talon looked up to see a shadow moving faster than the others, a dragon that did not follow the baby's guidance. It circled aggressively, wings beating hard. The baby dragon trilled sharply and the rogue dragon slowed, banking away. The colony understood a simple truth. The baby dragon was the link, the mediator. Without it, the dragon's behavior was unpredictable. Talon realized then that this small creature was not just a child, not just a symbol. It was a leader, a guide, and the key to their survival. If the baby dragon had not been fed, had not been shown kindness, there would have been no protection, no allies. Humanity's compassion had unlocked something extraordinary. Night deepened, and the dragons settled on ridges surrounding the colony, wings folding elegantly, eyes glowing faintly in the darkness. The baby dragon slept in Talon's lap, a small beacon of warmth and hope. The colony, too, began to settle, knowing that for now at least they were safe. But safety was only temporary. Talon knew the galaxy would hear of Orlia IV soon. Rumors, scouts, and greedy factions would come, expecting easy plunder, expecting humans to be weak and alone. And when they arrived, the dragons might not respond the same way. Talon's mind raced with plans, training the colony, understanding the dragons, preparing for the inevitable challenge. The baby dragon stirred, opening its eyes. It chirped softly and Talon leaned close, speaking in a whisper. I know, we'll get through this together. He felt its tiny wings brush against his arm, a reassurance, a silent promise. By dawn, the valley had quieted. The dragons perched on cliffs and rocky outcrops, observing silently. The colony worked, rebuilding, repairing, preparing. Talon walked through the workers, offering guidance, encouragement, and reassurance. The fear had not vanished, but it had transformed into determination. Humans could survive, even in the presence of creatures that dwarfed their imagination. Humans could adapt. Humans could lead. Talon stood on a ridge, holding the baby dragon, and looked out across the valley. The morning sun illuminated the distant mountains, and the dragons, shadows moved like living clouds over the rocks. He realized that this was more than a colony, more than survival. It was a lesson. Humanity's strength was not in weapons or technology, but in courage, empathy, and ingenuity. Above, the dragons shifted, wings spreading and folding, watching, learning, judging. Talon's heart swelled with pride and fear. Tomorrow would bring challenges, but for now they had shown the universe that humanity was capable of extraordinary things. He looked down at the baby dragon. We've come this far, he whispered, and this is just the beginning. Somewhere in the distance, another rumble echoed, faint but distinct. Talon's pulse quickened. He knew that Orcs IV's story and humanity's place in the galaxy was only just beginning. But he also knew this truth with absolute certainty. Compassion could change the course of history, and humans, no matter how small, insignificant, or underestimated, could rise to meet impossible odds. And as the dragon's eyes reflected the light of the rising sun, Talon Rise understood that the bond between human and dragon would define not just the fate of the colony, but perhaps the destiny of humanity itself. The valley was calm in the early hours, but Talon Rise knew calm never lasted long on Orcs IV. He stood on the ridge, holding the baby dragon close, its small wings twitching in anticipation. The other dragons perched on cliffs and jagged outcrops, their eyes glowing faintly in the dawn light, observing the colony below. They were patient, intelligent, and powerful. Talon had learned that they were not mere beasts, they were guardians, guides, and arbiters. But the galaxy did not wait. Rumors traveled faster than light. Other colonies, factions, and corporations caught wind of the dragons and the small human settlement. They saw opportunity where humans saw survival. By midday, strange ships began appearing on the horizon, black and sleek, their hulls gleaming in the twin suns. Talon felt a twinge of dread. These ships carried weapons, advanced drones, and humans who believed themselves superior. Stay calm, he told the colony council, who had gathered again in the central plaza. They don't know what they're facing. But we do. His voice carried over the murmurs of anxious colonists. We've survived because we understand, because we acted with courage, and because we're willing to protect those who cannot protect themselves. That is our advantage. The baby dragon chirped softly, responding to his tone. Talon had realized that its calls influenced the dragons above. They responded not to commands but to emotion, to intent. If the invaders acted with aggression, the dragons would react. But if the humans stayed clever, cautious, and composed, the dragons could be allies. The first ships entered the valley. They hovered just above the rocky ground, deploying drones to survey and record. The humans raised no weapons. The baby dragon let out a sharp trill, and the dragons above moved in formation, wings flaring to create gusts that disrupted the drone's sensors. The invaders cursed over comms, watching their machines falter and fail. Talon stepped forward, holding the baby dragon high. We do not want conflict, he called, his voice clear and commanding, but we will defend ourselves. A human voice crackled over the invaders' comms, sneering. We've heard tales of dragons and humans bonding. Don't think we're afraid. Step aside or we will take what's ours. Talon's eyes narrowed. You don't understand what you're dealing with. He turned to the baby dragon. Show them. The baby dragon trilled a musical, almost hypnotic sound. The dragons above responded instantly, their wings beating in unison, creating air currents so powerful that drones spun out of control, crashing against rocks harmlessly. The invaders tried to fire, but their weapons misfired, their targeting systems disrupted by the dragons' energy fields. Panic began to ripple among the invaders. Their confident facade cracked as they realized that their advanced technology was useless against the dragons. Talon saw an opportunity. We don't have to fight, he said. If you leave, no one gets hurt. If you attack, you will regret it. The invaders hesitated, scanning the sky. The dragons were enormous, intelligent, and coordinated. They were not mindless beasts to be conquered. Talon felt the weight of history pressing down on him. Humanity's survival depended not on firepower but on wit, courage, and the bond they had formed with the dragons. One of the lead invaders activated a pod, releasing more drones. They swarmed toward the dragons, aiming to disable them. The baby dragon let out a long, commanding trill. The dragons reacted as one, diving and flaring wings, creating shockwaves that knocked the drones from the sky. Machines exploded harmlessly in the distance, sending black smoke into the valley. The invaders froze. Talon walked forward, stepping confidently into the open, baby dragon in hand. The lead invader emerged from the ship, armored and armed, trying to intimidate. "Step aside, human," he demanded. "Your tricks won't save you." Talon's gaze was steady, unflinching. "This is not a trick," he said. "This is understanding, courage, and respect. You've come here thinking you're stronger, but you don't see what matters." The baby dragon trilled again, soft and commanding, almost like a song. The dragons above leaned closer, wings spread wide, shadows moving like living walls. The lead invader hesitated. His soldiers glanced nervously at each other, uncertainty replacing arrogance. Talon realized the moment had arrived. "Leave now," he said, voice firm. "Walk away or face consequences you cannot imagine." The invader drew his weapon, but the dragons above responded before a single shot could fire. One massive wing swept down, sending him sprawling without harm. The colony watched in awe as the dragons surrounded the intruders, a living barrier of immense power. Their eyes glowed, and their movements carried intent, judgment, and intelligence. The invader scrambled to retreat, signaling his ships to rise. Drones scattered, some exploding, others falling uselessly. Talon stepped forward, holding the baby dragon high. The creature's eyes met his, glowing softly. He felt a surge of pride, of connection, of understanding. Humanity had survived once again, not because of firepower, but because of courage, intelligence, and empathy. By nightfall, the invaders had retreated, leaving the colony intact. The dragons settled around the valley, their presence now a protective force rather than a threatening one. The baby dragon slept in Talon's arms, wings curled gently, a small but powerful symbol of hope. The colony celebrated quietly. There was no need for fanfare. The humans knew they had witnessed something extraordinary. They had survived impossible odds, proving that even against overwhelming power, humanity's ingenuity, courage, and moral strength could triumph. Talon walked through the plaza, watching his fellow colonists. Children who had cowered behind walls moments before now peeked at the dragons with awe. Engineers and scientists shared ideas, documenting behavior, patterns, and energy fields. Miners who had only known rocks and drills stared at the sky with wide eyes, understanding that the universe was larger, stranger, and more wondrous than they had ever imagined. He returned to the ridge, baby dragon in arms, and looked out at the valley. The dragon's eyes glowed faintly in the moonlight. Talon realized that these creatures, once unknown and feared, had become allies, teachers, and guardians. Humanity had earned their respect, not through force, but through compassion, courage, and understanding. The baby dragon stirred, stretching its tiny wings. Talon smiled, feeling the weight of responsibility and pride. He whispered softly, "This is just the beginning. We've proven ourselves, but the universe is vast. There will be more challenges, more tests, but we can face them." The dragon seemed to respond, a low rumble echoing across the valley, like a chorus of approval. Talon understood that humanity's place in the galaxy had shifted. They were no longer alone, no longer insignificant. They had allies in creatures more ancient and powerful than most humans could comprehend. And they had proven that even the smallest acts of kindness, the smallest gestures of courage, could echo across worlds. In the following days, the colony worked tirelessly. They built communication devices, refining the signals that linked humans and dragons. They explored the valley, mapping safe zones and learning more about the dragon's behavior. Talon discovered that each dragon had a distinct personality, intelligence, and even a sense of humor. They were not weapons, they were living beings, capable of reasoning, empathy, and loyalty. Visitors from other colonies arrived cautiously, observing the dragons from a distance. Some came with fear, others with curiosity. Talon greeted them, sharing the lesson he had learned. The universe respected courage, compassion, and ingenuity. Humanity had survived not by dominating, but by connecting, understanding, and acting with integrity. Weeks later, Talon led a group of scientists to explore further into the mountains. The dragons followed, soaring above with wings spread, shadows casting patterns across the rocks. The baby dragon, now growing stronger, chirped happily, guiding the larger creatures and the humans alike. Talon felt a sense of belonging he had never known. Humans and dragons, working together, exploring the unknown, forging a future where courage, empathy, and intelligence mattered more than brute strength. One evening, as the sun set, painting the valley in shades of red and gold, Talon stood on the ridge, baby dragon perched on his shoulder. He watched the dragons circle above, their wings moving with rhythm and grace. The colony below buzzed with activity, humans preparing for the future, confident in their abilities and their allies. Talon smiled. The universe was vast, dangerous, and unpredictable, but humanity had shown that it could rise, adapt, and thrive. They had proven that even the smallest human could change the course of history, that compassion and courage could reach across species, across worlds, and shape destinies. The baby dragon trilled softly, nuzzling Talon's neck. He whispered back, "We've done it. We've survived. And together we'll face whatever comes next." Above them the dragon soared, a living sky of wings and power. And for the first time in the colony's history, Orlia IV felt not like a remote mining outpost, but like the heart of a new beginning, a place where humans, dragons, and the universe itself had acknowledged that courage, empathy, and intelligence could shape the future. Talon took a deep breath, feeling the wind from the dragon's wings stir his hair. He knew challenges lay ahead, but he also knew humanity's potential. The small, crying dragon he had once fed had changed everything. It had connected humans to creatures of immense power, and through that bond, it had shown what humans were truly capable of. As night fell completely, the stars shimmered over Orlia IV. The dragon's shadows blended with the darkness, guardians watching, waiting, and guiding. Talon held the baby dragon tightly, feeling its warmth, its life, and its promise. Humanity had risen and the galaxy had taken notice. The adventure was far from over. But for the first time, Talon understood something profound. Humans were never weak, never insignificant. They had courage, ingenuity, and a spark of compassion that could awaken the impossible. And that spark, once lit, could never be extinguished. Above the valley, the dragon's wings moved in unison, a living sky of power and grace. Talon smiled, whispering one final thought into the night. "We are ready." And for Orlia IV, for humanity, and for the universe beyond, that readiness marked the beginning of a new era.